Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for another edition of the Racing with Rob and Roller podcast. My name is Rob Peeters, and alongside me is Josh Roller. And as always, before we get started today, I want to remind our listeners, if you haven't already, be sure to follow Josh on Twitter at roller_01, ROLLER_0 and then myself at rpeters33, RPEETERS33. There's a lot to get into today's show, and I'll be honest with Josh here. There were so many races I tried to catch this weekend, and I don't really think I slept all that much. I think I might have gotten a few power naps in, but for the most part on weekends like this, I'm burning the midnight oil to keep up with all the racing. So with that said, let's go ahead and start off how our weekends went, and then we'll jump right into the races from the weekend. We've got a ton of races to talk about. I mean, there was every possible race. I mean, trying to watch that for me, going back and forth between all those races, and the absolutely dramatic Cricket World Cup moments that I've been following as well. What about you, Josh? How's your weekend been?
Weekend was good. Like I said, some exciting racing, some exciting moments to talk about at the very least. So that's trying to catch up on the ones I missed, and hopefully we'll have a good conversation about them today.
Yes, we've got a ton to talk about today, and I'm quite excited about it because we're going to go ahead and jump into one of the bigger races of the weekend, the Formula 1 French Grand Prix at Circuit Paul Ricard in Le Castellet, France. It was the 63rd front row lockout for Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas. Lewis Hamilton sat on the pole and led all 53 laps at Circuit Paul Ricard for his 6th victory of the 2019 World Championship. That becomes Hamilton's 200th points-paying finish in 237 starts. The race overall was relatively just uneventful, unfortunately, compared, I think, to last year. Last year was a little bit better. I enjoyed it. But this year, I was already running on low amounts of sleep, and it was already hard to stay awake for that. It just seemed like the racing in general was not up to par where it should have been.
Yeah, and you know, Hamilton later said after the race, you know, don't blame the drivers for the rules. We don't make them, we just drive the cars. Yeah, it was just nothing. You had a couple moments, and you had a couple things that made the race interesting. And, you know, like Daniel Ricciardo's move there at the end of the race. There was a move earlier in the race with him and Romain Grosjean. And then you had Lando Norris's issue that kind of captivated the audience there. The last 20 or so laps with him winding down. And then you had the initial start of the race where Sergio Perez is penalized for going off track and taking the escape route, but coming out ahead of the competitors. That just needs to be a redesigned escape route and re-entry, doesn't it, Rob?
Yeah, I love Circuit Paul Ricard. I think it's a beautiful racetrack. I think there's a lot of really great aspects of it, but the problem is it's just ugly to look at. You got so much. I mean, the track is all runoff area. Really, there's no one part of the track that isn't runoff area. And to me, I think that's something that's just really problematic, and that it really allows for, you know, a lot of people complain about Formula 1 having all this runoff area, and then you go to Circuit Paul Ricard where it's all runoff area, and you get situations like that where, you know, there's cars and guys that end up going off into that runoff area, and they end up you know, they end up gaining some time where they shouldn't, and so the FIA ends up penalizing them. They end up disputing the penalty, things like that. But, you know, at situations like that too, it's difficult when you don't have the best passing zones. I mean, you do have some pretty decent passing zones, I like to think, but
you got to have a car that's able to get there to the passing zone too.
Right.
And we had a couple good mid-pack battles though, but it came down to who was able to keep the car on the track to make that clean pass, because he knew you were going to get penalized.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a situation where, you know, when you're penalized for trying to make a move and trying to pass a car, I don't know. That kind of frustrates me. It was very frustrating. I think an entirely frustrating weekend. We noticed, you know, Daniel Ricciardo had a double penalty for his attempt to pass.
It was two passes. Two passes.
Yeah.
He was a pass on Lando Norris, which somewhat succeeded. Then he's passed by Kimi Räikkönen, and then he tries to pass him, basically putting all four wheels any other track would have been completely grass.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, where Ricciardo, I'd seen some passes all weekend where, you had a situation where a guy was quite literally trying to go off the line, off the track altogether in order to make a pass, or because someone was defending the line too well or defending too much.
There really wasn't room for him to make that final pass on Kimi anyway.
No, there really wasn't.
I think this is going to be a penalty. Initially, I didn't think the first one was going to be one, but I guess the tires were further enough below the line enough that the FIA felt like, we got to penalize him twice for these incidents.
There's there's just so many penalties being handed down, and I'm not quite sure what the drivers can do about it, because a lot of the penalties are just because the drivers are trying to race.
Yeah, exactly.
And that kind of just makes it very frustrating for me to watch, because I would like to see drivers be rewarded for being able to race. But, and I thought at the time when they decided, okay, yeah, we're going to change the front wings to make them more basic, more simplified, maybe make it easier to follow in behind another car. Now, it still kills the front tires. I mean, there's almost nothing these guys can do to really make a decent pass. And it wasn't really all that different, unfortunately, in the lead up to the race. There were two. It was a dual weekend with Formula 2 and Formula 3. If you don't know what those are, they were formerly GP2 and GP3. They've since changed them to different names. I'm excited because I always typically end up watching the feeder series to F1 because I think that they're typically very, very enjoyable races, very fun races. So I'm going to go ahead here real quick and jump into Formula 2, the Formula 2 weekend. The Formula 3 weekend was very, very uneventful. There's really not a whole ton to talk about, unfortunately, in Formula 3 right now. Formula 2 is where all the real action is right now. So in race 1, the Dutchman Nick de Vries won his third race of the season, keeping his stronghold on the championship, and IndyCar driver Jordan King, who is contesting the full season except for the Monaco Grand Prix because he was in Indianapolis for that. He finished P6 in his MP Motorsports machine, and in the race there were a ton of unsafe virtual safety car procedures. So essentially what we're seeing here is more penalties were handed down in the F2 race, but this was for unsafe virtual safety car situations. So in the beginning of the race, there was an accident with Mick Schumacher and Sean Galeo. Those two are teammates. They are teammates. And Sean Galeo locked up his brakes in turn 1 and crashed into Schumacher, basically going up and over him. And that caused a safety car, and then there was another incident later on in the race that caused a virtual safety car. And in that virtual safety car, you are supposed to reduce your speed by 30% and maintain your gap distance behind the car in front. So you're not supposed to gain or lose any time to the car in front. You're just supposed to reduce your speed by 30%. It's as if there's a safety car out there, but there's not. So what's ended up happening is during that safety car procedure, and this was really one of the first times that I'd heard about this, I did not know that this resulted in penalty points being added to super licenses. But apparently it did, because Mahavir Raghunathan, I'm going to say it, probably one of the slowest drivers in the F2 paddock, did this 3 times where he failed to meet the virtual safety car procedures. So each time they awarded him 3 penalty points on a super license, which resulted in 9 penalty points, which brought him to a grand total of 12.
Now, what would he get the other 3 points for, do you know?
I wasn't sure, but knowing Mahavir, he didn't even take the first turn in Monaco. He just shortcutted it.
Let's clarify. You get 11 points on your license before.
Yes, you get 11 points on your license. So he had 3 before, and then they added 9 to his in one race. In one race, they added 9 penalty points. So he ended up with 12 penalty points that bans him now from the next race in Austria. So that'll be next weekend. Mahavir Raghunathan will not be there. And some late-breaking news. We do have some late-breaking news on the front on who will replace Mahavir Raghunathan. And if you've been following IndyCar all season and following Indy Lights and things like that, you will recognize this name. Patricio O'Ward was listed earlier today on the preliminary entry list for the Austria at Formula 2 rounds. And he was driving the MP Motorsports machine. So he will be teamed with Jordan King He will be teamed with Jordan King, also an IndyCar driver, next week. So it'll be an all IndyCar MP Motorsports in Austria. What do you think about that, Josh?
That's pretty cool. And, with the award deal, we've seen that for a few weeks, that he'd be driving over there. Just more seat time for him. Be interested to see what path he goes down now, if he tries to stick over there in Europe and maybe race in Formula One, get up there, or if he tries to get back to IndyCar. I think that'll be an interesting storyline to keep a close eye on the next, I don't know, 18 months or so, something like that.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a great opportunity for Pato. I know that having the Red Bull backing definitely helped the situation, helped him get this ride, I'm sure.
And it stinks that they're not trying to help him in IndyCar too. I know they said that Red Bull wouldn't sponsor him over here, and that kind of stinks in my book. I'm like, you're sponsoring the guy, but you sign him over there in the hopes that he stays over there in Europe. So
this is a great opportunity for him to impress people, I think, for sure.
Absolutely.
This is a great opportunity for him to race against guys that he's never really raced against. Let's see where he stacks up to the Formula 2 caliber of drivers, because MP Motorsports is not known to be one of the better teams. Part of the reason why Mahavir Raghunathan even has that ride, because he's the only driver. I read this the other night, trying to figure out, just why he was even in that race. His family just puts forth money and they take whatever ride's available. And all he's ever won to his name is a Boss GP championship where his closest competitor didn't even contest 6 rounds. So, it's kind of like, wow, okay. And in addition to penalty points, Tatiana Calderon for driving for Arden Racing, the very likable Colombian driver, also failed to adhere to the virtual safety car procedures in that race in Circuit Paul Ricard. So in Formula 2 Race 2, I'm going to move on to that. Antoine Hubert, a name probably not many people are familiar with, especially if you listen into this podcast, because we've never talked about it. Won the race from reverse grid pole, and if you're unfamiliar with how Formula 2 operates, they run 2 races in a weekend, a Saturday race and a Sunday race. They qualify for the Saturday race, and then the Sunday race, what they do is they invert the top 8 finishing positions. So Antoine Hubert finished 8th, which meant he was started on the pole for the next race, and he won from the pole. American driver Juan Manuel Correa finished 2nd after taking advantage of reverse grid. Jordan King finished 11th. Arden sees one driver win the race, while their other driver, Tatiana Calderon, was the last car classified. She classified and finished as 19th because she finished more than 90% of the race, but she did not finish the race. She had an accident where she spun off with about 2 laps to go and beached her car, and that's a situation in which you can really see the parity. That's one of the things about Formula 2 and Formula 3 and Formula 1 is you're judged based on how well you perform on your teammates. And for Tatiana to have a difficult weekend like that, it's very frustrating for her, but, I'm sure that she'll bounce back. And I'm sure that, her connections to Pippa Mann will hopefully, maybe lead her over here to the States at some time. Yeah, so that being said, though, the F2 season, typically drivers start moving a lot of seats start moving around, and already we've had some late breaking news already on today. Campos Racing has officially announced that former Trident driver and current Haas F1 junior driver, Indian Arjun Maini, will contest the rest of the Formula 2 season with Campos Racing, replacing Dorian Boccolanci. So, that's all for F2. That's all for F1. I know we've bored you a lot. I bored you a lot. I don't know how excited you are to hear all about that. But we're going to move in to one of our favorite segments of the podcast, is the featured paint scheme. So Josh, why don't you take it from here, and we'll describe our featured paint schemes for this week.
Yeah. So we decided to do the 1995 NASCAR SuperTruck Series presented by Craftsman. This is just a cool year to talk about in NASCAR in general, and a lot of that has to contribute because of the Truck Series being added. So the 1995 SuperTruck Series was the inaugural season for the trucks. Today was the Gander Outdoors Truck Series. A total of 20 races took place. 18 of those races were on tracks 1 mile or shorter. Phoenix, they opened the season and closed the season in Phoenix, and the Milwaukee Mile, I believe, were the only mile race, but everything else was sub that, except for 2 road course races. Yeah, the trucks went to 2 road courses, Heartland Park, Topeka, and Sonoma Raceway.
Heartland Park, Topeka is a very, very underrated road course.
Very underrated. I wish it
one of
went
my
back.
favorite. Oh, it's so beautiful. I love the drag strip there, but I would love to see like IMSA or some kind of Trans Am, some kind of sports car series go to Heartland Park because it's a beautiful track. Anyway, continue, Josh.
Truck series needs to go back there. I think that'd be cool to get them back there.
Oh,
myself.
100%. That would make everything better.
Eventual champion Mike Skinner won 8 races for Richard Childress Racing, and Ron Hornaday, who finished 3rd in the final standings, won 6 races for DEI. Lost Papa John sponsorship for him on that one. That was a...
Yeah, he kind of struggled for sponsorship a little bit there. He kind of ran through a lot of different sponsors, which was surprising, but he had a really good season, and it turned out to be a very successful one because it springboarded him later into Busch Series and later into Cup competition.
Yep.
And now he ended up being one of the top drivers in the truck series throughout the 2000s and 2010s. So.
Yeah, he definitely where he made his name there. So, Rob, what was your featured paint scheme from that year?
Well, my featured paint scheme is going to have to be one that actually didn't run the full season, but one that I'm very fond with. It is John Nemechek, not Joe, his older brother, the late John Nemechek's number 87 Burger King Chevrolet for Nemco Motorsports. Now, John didn't run this scheme full-time. He only ran it for his first 8 races, and he didn't run the full season with Nemco either. He skipped the road course races, and he didn't run the first 3 races of the season. So his first race in that truck, the Burger King truck, came at Mesa Marin, the first Mesa Marin, in late April of 1995. And his best run came in his second start, which would be the next race at Portland Speedway, where he finished 14th. He stopped running this scheme at IRP when a new sponsor came on board. But I picked this one because one of the things I like so much about the truck series, especially in 1995 and from back then, was how they converted paint schemes used on Cup cars onto the trucks.
Because so many Cup teams were running in the trucks.
Absolutely, you had all that backing. You had all these veteran drivers that were very good. You didn't really see a lot of young drivers. I mean, it wasn't until about maybe Kenny Irwin.
It was the later 90s because you had a lot of these guys were Cup guys. And a lot of these guys were short track guys, and a lot of from out west too. So they were coming over here. It was a different series. It wasn't the feeder series it is today. The Cup. It was kind of a destination series, all its own.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first inklings of it being a feeder series was when you saw guys like Kevin Harvick, and and I mentioned Kenny Irwin being the first 2 real success stories to come out of the trucks, being kind of a development series where Harvick and Irwin both were able to get wins in the series and eventually go on to race in Cup. So, but that was one of the things that was so cool about that period of time, and especially just it back then how this paint schemes looked were just more entertaining than they were today. But anyway, so the John Nemechek's number 87 Nemco Motorsports Chevrolet, sponsored by Burger King, is one of my personal favorites. So, Josh, what is your featured paint scheme of the week?
Butch Miller's number 98 Ray Bestis Ford, driven for Jerry Herrick, and what would become Liberty Racing.
It'll be Kenny Irwin's car later, too.
Yeah, it would. It would be Kenny Irwin's car later. It was a tough one. It was between this one and the Walker Evans 20 Dodge trucks. But this one, it just to me stood out. The colors of the car, the blue red, kind of then faded to orange into yellow, and then the white rear end. It was a great looking truck. When you go back and watch a race on YouTube, or if you got a chance to watch something on ESPN Classics, you could pick this truck out very easily. He won a race at Colorado National Speedway, the Total Petroleum 200. That was his only win. He had 9 top 5s, 14 top 10s, but he only led 93 laps on the season, and he finished 4th in the standings, 412 points behind champion Mike Skinner. So, I mean, Mike Skinner obviously just dominated that year.
That pretty much set Mike Skinner up for a positive future, because, that was one of his best seasons that he had ever put together. Unfortunately, it never really translated to the Cup side.
A couple injuries kind of hurt him there, but he came back down to the trucks and
he was always better there.
He found a really good groove there. So, we're going to move on now to Formula E. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah, we're going to go ahead and... He explains this a lot better than me.
All of the Formula E stuff. We're going to get rid of all of the European stuff first. We're going to get all that out of the way, so that that's all out of the way, so we get the real meat of the stuff that probably everybody watching at least had a chance to watch. So, the Formula E Bern E-Prix was the first was the first E-Prix to be held in Bern. The last Switzerland race they held was in Zurich. Jean-Eric Vergne won his third race of the season after leading every single lap, all 31 laps of the 45-minute race, in an uncharacteristically dull race for Formula E standards. The Bern E-Prix, the new track, was way too narrow. And I really don't know how else to say that. It was just so narrow in that I don't really think there were any decent passing zones. Attack mode was almost useless. It didn't seem like anyone really had anything for Jean-Eric Vergne, maybe until there at the end, but even then it really wasn't much. But Vergne's win puts him now 28 points ahead of Lucas de Grassi heading into the final E-Prix weekend at New York next month, which will be a doubleheader weekend on Saturday and Sunday. Next month, I believe it's July 14th. 13th and 14th. Okay, so... but the first race, the Bern E-Prix, saw a log jam in the first chicane that stopped the race briefly and ended Robin Frenz' race before it even began. And the thing that was weird about this, and Josh and I, you and I talked about it before the show, but it was very odd, and it was one of the strangest things I'd ever seen. So they start the race, and there was an accident on the first lap. So they go safety car, and then eventually red flag. Because there was a log jam, cars were stalled, cars basically just stopped because the track was too narrow. I mean, guys were trying to make it 3 wide going into the first chicane, and there was only room for maybe 1.5 cars.
Yeah, that obviously the math doesn't add up on that one.
No, absolutely not. So you've got cars just stuck here.
Square peg and a round hole.
Right. And so, they go red, they get everybody, they try to get everybody restarted. Frenz was unable to restart the race, but most everybody else was. And during the red flag, race officials said, all right, we're going to just, kind of restart this race. Everybody's going to restart from the positions they're started. So they were going to completely scrap the whole first lap that they ran. And there was a huge dispute prior to going back to green, where there was a whole ton of drivers that came up to the stewards and were like, no, this is terrible. You can't do this. This is not right. Drivers who made up like 6 positions on the start now lost them, were like penalized for them because they decided to restart the race using the original qualifying positions. And, how is that fair? And I do not understand. I had never heard that before. I had never heard of that being an instance before.
Only the time I could think about this was 2001 NASCAR's All-Star race, where it rained, it just started downpouring, and a bunch of cars wrecked. Well, that's an all-star race. Only thing that's on the line there is $1 million. And I know we might say, hold on, $1 million? What? But this is an actual points-paying race. If the race was green, you gotta...
Yeah, I mean, once you start the race, qualifying positions should become moot.
I mean, imagine like the first GP at Indianapolis.
Right.
They did a standing start, which did not work out. Imagine if they did that. Say, okay, guys, you can all go fix your cars, and we're going to just restart again. I'm like, oh, hold on, that's not fair. The green is out. The lights went out, I guess would be the more proper term. Right. But here, you can't do that. The green has started. If you made up a bunch of positions, good for you. You avoided the wreck.
Right. I mean, guys were very upset. I mean, I saw Antonio Felix da Costa, Felipe Massa. I mean, those guys were very heated. I mean, I'd never seen Felipe Massa like that. I mean, he was very defiant. He was very much like, you guys can't do this. You guys are wrong.
He did not look happy.
No, I mean, and I don't blame him one bit. I love Formula E, but I think they're like Formula 1 too, where guys are just way too penalized. I mean, there were guys that were...
But this wasn't a penalty. This wasn't necessarily a steward decision where it was one guy 5 seconds. This affected everybody with one swipe of the pen, basically.
And then that's the thing that leads more to my point, where you already see a situation in Formula E where guys are disqualified for excessive power usage, or having too little kilowatts been used or something like that. I mean, the regulations are so strict. And then the one time that they're actually allowed to race and drive, you decide, oh well, everybody raced, everybody drove, everybody got off the start, and everything was fine for a while, and now we're just going to restart the whole thing the way it started. I just didn't like that. And the race overall was just too dull, and the race was like a 1.5 lane track where you just could not pass. I think they have to widen it, or they have to choose a new location, because there's just no way that Bern E-Prix is going to be popular again. I mean, I heard that it was a popular fan event, that there was a lot of fans that did enjoy it, motor racing fans in Switzerland, but there was also a lot of uprising, because I read a lot of pre-race stories that said the people of Switzerland reject the idea of cars being the future. So they believe more in bicycling, and said that bicycling and walking is how we're supposed to go about this.
I'm not bicycling down from Kokomo to Indianapolis to do this podcast. I'm not. That doesn't sound too fun.
You might be able to do that if you're in Switzerland, I guess. I don't know. I mean,
I probably could walk to your house in
Right.
Switzerland. That's how close we'd be. But no.
No, it's not.
Cars are here to stay. Just depends on how it's being.
I mean, these are electric cars too, so it's not even like it's like noise pollution.
Yeah, the propulsion system might change, but cars are still going to be here in 150 years.
It's just like a giant festival. That's really all it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Anyway, let's move on here, and let's get into the stock car racing. We're going to talk about stock car racing here, because we spent the first half hour of this time talking about Formula cars. And Lord, I don't know how many people listen to this podcast about Formula cars. You probably want to hear our stock car and IndyCar takes. So let's go ahead and get right into that with the ARCA Menard Series, which is one of the first races of the weekend at Gateway. I was able to catch it because, again, thank you Fubo TV for carrying MAV TV. So I've been able to watch the last 2 ARCA races, and hopefully we'll be able to catch the rest of the season, because I have 500 hours of DVR space. And that's probably the coolest aspect of what I have, because I
That's a great invention, by the way. It doesn't matter who it's from, a DVR. So
DVR.
Ty Gibbs wins this race.
Yes, Ty Gibbs.
16-year-old.
16 years old. Ty Gibbs won the race. He's the grandson of Joe Gibbs. I talked about him a little bit in the last ARCA race at Madison, where I believe he finished 8th.
Yep.
But he won the race on a last corner, not last lap, but very last corner.
Yes.
Pass on Sam Mayer. And in post-race, it didn't look like Mayer was not too pleased with the way Gibbs raced him, Josh. I don't know. What do you think? Did you think that Ty Gibbs got into the back of Mayer a little bit there?
I don't think they touched. They had a couple less cameras there running the show, so we didn't have you couldn't get a straight-on angle like we could later that night with the truck race. But I don't think they touched. It looked like, Ty said this in Victory Lane, Mayer was undecided what he wanted to do. And I'm he went kind of high there, and he gets loose. He wanted to turn low, and there might have been a little bit of air that caused some disruptions that helped Mayer get loose and sent up the track. But I don't think there was contact. But, hey, Gibbs did what he had to do to win that race. What have we been saying for a long time? Do what you have to do to win.
And this was his first win, and I made a note here in the notes. This is his first win of the season, but he finished second 3 times before.
And so that you're hungry at that point. He said, I see an opening. There's an opening on the track. Okay, I got to go for that. If you don't, you quit racing at that point. So, look, I applaud him for making the move. Mm-hmm. Does it stink that Mayer lost a couple positions there? And
I think he only lost one.
Well,
I think he
lost one.
Eckes finished second.
Went from first to third. So it stinks that he was leading up to that point. But Gibbs had a heck of a restart. Restarted 8th there with 7 to go. Mm-hmm. And I don't see a problem with the move at all. Mayer's going to be upset. But this is a 15 and 16-year-old racing, and we're going to see them around for a while, and they'll have the wins when their careers are done.
You're always going to be upset when you lose the lead, I think. But at some point, you have to understand that your career is young and you still have many opportunities to win. And I think Sam Mayer is the kind of guy where, just having watched him in the last 2 races, it kind of has shown me the kind of driver that he is, and I have no doubt that he'll win another race.
And this is a guy he was going to be around in the ARCA probably next year, might be doing some more K&N stuff.
He's a good driver.
He's a good driver. And he's racing for GMS, a great team. And here in a couple, next year we might, depending on how this goes, we might see him in a couple truck races next year as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's in a right right path. So has the RTB upset? Absolutely, and we might see him in victory lane yet this year. In
Absolutely.
ARCA too, so.
And the thing about ARCA race too is we talked about the last week as well. ARCA had only 18 cars enter at Madison. This week, 22 cars entered the race, with 12 finishing the race.
Yeah. Well, a couple of championship people had issues too.
Yes,
in this race too. So this championship got shaken up a little bit. I think 4 guys within 100 points of each other. So that for the championship, which is a little uncharacteristic maybe by this point in the time for ARCA. So it's good to see. We'll have at least a decent run down for the championship.
I think in ARCA for that, it really goes to show quality over quantity.
Yeah.
I think they have some really quality drivers in there, at least running up at the front. Definitely in the lower to mid pack, I think there's some drivers there that probably would be better off staying home. But ARCA right now is in a good place in which I think their competition level, despite the low amount of entries, the competition level at the top between 5, 6, 7 drivers is real tight.
Yes.
And I think that's real good for them. Because even if you have a situation where you have sub 20 cars, it's still real good to see at least 2 cars battling out for the lead.
Yep.
You can put on a good show with a small number of cars that can be pretty entertaining. So, but speaking of small levels of cars, that was not the case for the K&N Pro Series West at Sonoma this weekend, which I was able to catch on Fans Choice TV, and I believe you'll be able to catch it on NBCSN this week. I'm not entirely certain. Don't quote me on when it is. It might be on Thursday. I don't know when it is. But it was the Procore 200 for the NASCAR K&N West Series. Hailie Deegan won the pole in a field of 32 cars, so we know where most of the ARCA field went, including Austin Dillon, Daniel Hemrick, Ryan Preece, Cole Custer, and Noah Gragson.
That should show she had of course she's on a really good team, but she was able to beat those guys who, let's see, Dillon, Dillon
has a Daytona 500 win.
Well, and I'm trying to think, if Hemrick and Preece, I know Gragson's made a start at Sonoma, but I don't know about these other 3 guys, if they've been at Sonoma or not.
I don't think Cole Custer's ever been there.
But that's pretty impressive for her to go out there and beat some of the guys who, this is where they race every year.
Yeah.
In the West Series, so props to her.
And she was the highest finishing series regular in 8th place.
That's true.
And this is interesting. Trails Derek Kraus by only a single point for first place in the series standings. Did she have 3 wins on the season, right?
Yeah. 2 wins on the season. 2 wins on the season. 3 career wins, 2 wins on the season.
So she's okay. People can say what they want about Hailie Deegan.
She's the real deal.
Yeah, I'm gonna step up on my soapbox today real quick, and I know.
Should I put a clock on you?
I don't think so. I talked a little bit about earlier Tatiana Calderon and how much I would love to see her over here at IndyCar because I think she's a very good driver. She performed very well in Formula V8 series when I saw her in 2017. She ran the last 2 races. Also interesting in that race was Pietro Fittipaldi. Pietro ran the Formula V8 series as well before coming over to IndyCar, and Pietro was able to more or less adjust and adapt fairly well. I think it would be the same situation with Tatiana Calderon. I really think that the way she's running right now in Formula 2 is not good. She's not competitive enough. I think she'd have a lot more fun over here in IndyCar with maybe a competitive team. I think she could probably bring a lot of money over to the Carlin team if she wants to team up with Max Chilton next year or something. I'm speculating on that. I don't think that would happen. I'm speculating, but that's my soapbox. That's what I think. Speaking of that, comparatively, Hailie Deegan is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Hailie Deegan has done some incredible things. She has won. She had, and people say, oh, well, she bumped guys for the win. Well, you know what Noah Gragson did almost all race? Bumped guys for the win.
Well,
bumped guys for position. I mean, I'm certain Cole Custer was probably angry at him because I saw him Noah Gragson beat the back bumper off of Cole Custer for like the last 20 laps there after Gragson was penalized for
jumping
the start early in the race, and he had to basically fight his way all the way back up through the standings to be able to even contend for the win.
And Hailey's doing it the right way too.
Yes,
and she, and she's racing in these lower divisions. And she has the backing. Mm-hmm. I think she could probably go do some truck races right now. But
she should replace Natalie Decker.
But she is running and getting experience. She's getting laps. She's like, okay, I'm running up front right now. Let's get these laps down. Let's get some wins down. Then let's take the next step. She basically, the only reason she's running ARCA right now is probably to get some experience on these bigger tracks.
And I think for her in ARCA too, but that's the thing too about her stats in ARCA are very different from her stats in the K&N series.
But she's turning laps.
She is turning laps. I think that's really more important at this level. And to start on the pole in a road course, too, is even more impressive.
Yes.
Because I think that shows your talents, and that shows that you know braking points, you know shifting points, you know the best lines to take on the track, things like that. She's very good. I'm excited to see what her future holds.
Now let's get into what happened at the end.
Yeah, so we already mentioned that Noah Gragson was penalized earlier in the race for jumping the restart. And so at the very end of the race, there were several restarts, because
Overtime, NASCAR overtimes.
I lost count of how many overtimes they had, or how many attempts to finish the race they had. So Ryan Preece crossed the finish line first under yellow, but it was odd because when he crossed the white flag too, they were giving him the black flag, and that put Noah Gragson, who was in second, basically into the lead, and they called Ryan Preece for jumping the restart. Now, I didn't see anything wrong with what Preece did.
I did not see it. Here's the thing that I was looking at. The flag, he was timing it perfectly, so he must have known where the line was, and that's where he was going. When he jumped, to me, the flagman had his hand out, don't go, moves his hand. That's what the time Preece went. So he was timing it really well.
I believe he was in the restart zone as well.
I think he was in the restart zone too. And we later found out yesterday, I believe it was when Daniel Hemrick tweeted, hey,
yes,
he didn't jump. I didn't get a good start.
So Hemrick acknowledged it.
Yeah, he was getting penalized for basically having the better car. I'm like, okay, so that should tell you something.
Because I saw, that was the thing. And I'm sorry I had to interrupt you, but, several times there, it was every restart that Preece was in front, I mean, he just jumped out to a big lead, and they couldn't catch him. So it wasn't like he jumped the start and, guys were faster than him. He just had a better car. He was just faster. He knew the course better. And they gave him the black flag and said no.
He was very upset after the race. Holy cow.
Oh, I totally understand why. Yeah. I understand why. I think in that situation, when you crossed the finish line first, it's just like the Canadian Grand Prix in Formula 1. Vettel crossed the line first, but he didn't win the race, and he's like, well, what the heck? In that situation, it's like, why are we penalizing drivers who cross the line first before we actually investigate the matter?
Yeah.
It seemed like
it's a long lap at Sonoma, but I don't think that was enough time, because they easily could have gone to and said, look, we're going to hold off on celebrations. NASCAR could have gone on their radios and said, look, don't do no celebrating by you, Preece, or you, Gragson. We're looking into this. All right.
Finish is unofficial.
The finish is unofficial. Let's review it. And I know it's like, hold on, we gotta let the fans know who won here. People are walking out now, but let's get it right the first time. So let's talk about the second race now in Sonoma, the Cup race.
Oh yeah, there was a good Cup race on.
Yeah, the Martin Truex holds off a late charge from Kyle Busch, who had 3-lap fresher tires.
I don't really know if it was much of a late charge. It didn't really look like Kyle could ever get to him.
Well, okay. But it was his third win race at Sonoma. He got a second career win there in 2013, and then he won there last year, his fourth road course victory. He won at Watkins Glen in 2017. So Martin Truex Jr. has kind of turned out to be a little bit of a good road course driver.
I read that Martin Truex becomes the first Sonoma winner to win it with 3 different teams. He won it with MWR, he won it with Furniture Row, now he's won it with Gibbs.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, definitely. I don't know who would win it 2 with different teams. Stewart won with 2 different teams.
Because Stewart won for Gibbs, and then he won for his own team. Yeah. But I believe, Martin Truex is the first. I read that on Reddit the other day. So shout out to Reddit. Can't remember who to give credit to, but thanks for Reddit for having very obscure facts.
There you go.
So
it was Gibbs' 10th victory of the year in 16 races. Holy cow. They are the team to beat right now. And it's really Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. pulling that show, but Gibbs, you're going to win in the Cup. You got to beat them.
Are we ever going to have more winners, or is this
this is interesting how this is playing out? Well, they got 10 races left. It's going to be interesting how the playoffs shake out here. I thought looking at this, passing zones would be the obvious turn 11, the hairpin.
Mm-hmm.
I think turn 4, the part of the course where it turns in to go to the carousel, I think that would be a good spot. And then the carousel itself would be an interesting place if you were able to get in a good enough run, put your nose in there early and make a pass. And then the wide turn 7 hairpin on the other end of the track that brings you back into the course as we know it through the S's. It kind of didn't turn out that way completely until the later stage of the race when drivers started to push, and then I think this also came down to the cars just weren't built to.
I'm worried about this package. I'm worried about the package that they brought here today because it very much was I felt, and this is odd because I look forward to NASCAR road races so much.
I do too, and that was disappointing.
It almost left me like a Formula One race, where you spend so much of the weekend being so hyped up only to just watch a boring race.
And I felt like there was good racing in it, and we'll talk a little bit about one of the guys who made it interesting later, but like Denny Hamlin was able to drive through, so you had to have a pretty good superior car or just better tires to make moves, and I don't think that's the way it should be at Sonoma.
No, I think... I'm curious to hear your opinion on this because I was not particularly all that big of a fan of the return of the carousel. I don't really think it added what they said it was going to add. I think that the previous circuit was allowed for a lot better racing with stock cars than I think the carousel did. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think the K&N race was a lot better racing-wise with the carousel, but I just felt like on the Cup side, the carousel didn't add anything. Maybe you have a different opinion because you were more favorable to the carousel.
I had a different opinion before the race. I'll say that my opinion changed. I thought, okay, we have a passing zone. We had 3 passing zones last year, and I think, okay, now we got a 4th passing zone. This should be fun, and 3 of them are in quick succession. So if you can make moves, maybe we can see a pass in the turn 7. But it didn't shake out that way. Cars were too tight or too loose, and therefore you couldn't make the move that you wanted through the carousel. It was basically one lane through. We saw a couple guys stick their nose down in there, and a couple times. Turn 4, we saw a few moves. We didn't see it at all in the first 2 stages. So I was disappointed in the fact that what I thought would happen did not happen. And again, we could get into why that is, but and I think it's more of a car and tire deal.
Oh, absolutely.
A common theme that we've talked about on this podcast.
Package / lack of tire degradation.
Yeah, it's the wrong tire. It could just be a wrong tire type deal. But I wanted about halfway through the final stage, because I'm like, okay, first 2 stages, let's see how this goes. And about halfway through the final stage, I'm like, okay, I want the 1.99 circuit back.
Yeah, I'm still, and you mentioned stages, and we have to also mention that there were no cautions other than the 2 stage ending cautions this whole race. And I think that could have played something into it.
Restarts make road course racing very interesting.
Right, restarts are what's so key at a road course, especially with stock cars, especially really with any series, period.
Yeah.
You need to kind of have at least one restart to really make the road course, I think, entertaining. And we didn't see that.
And they didn't have the cautions that... What we needed was a caution about 5 laps or so.
We needed a caution sometime. We needed a caution that wasn't a stage caution.
Yeah, and you saw where guys...
Throw a wrench into the strategy.
Exactly. And speaking of wrench into strategy, it did not work out for guys like Larson and Byron. The idea to pit during the stage break caution was a shot in the foot from the get-go, because Byron I think he had a pretty good car in clean air and out front, one of the top few cars, but back in traffic, he couldn't get it going, he couldn't get moving. I think Hamlin and a guy named Matt DiBenedetto were about the only guys who could get their car working through traffic, and Larson and Byron deserved better finishes than they had. But
absolutely.
The pit strategy was not a winning one. You needed to pit before the stage caution, or before the pit lane closed with the 2 laps to go before the stage. So that did not work out for them at all. We can't talk about this without talking about the last Fox broadcast of the year, and therefore it was Darrell Waltrip's last up in the booth. one of my favorite lines. Well,
I tweeted this out because it was great.
Before I say that, though, he got a nod from Lee Diffie in the IndyCar broadcast a couple hours before the race, so that was nice of him. But he goes, talking about Mark Truex Jr. when Kyle Busch is running him down there in the last thing, he was cutting seconds off every couple laps there, and he says, Martin Truex is sitting on a hot stove but peeing ice water. Jeff and Mike laugh. He goes, why can't you can say that? That's fine. And then he goes, what are they going to do? Fire me? I'm like, Darrell, where was this at, man?
He's right.
And so it was great. I think I'm going to miss DW a little bit. You and I, we grew up basically watching NASCAR. And he was in the Fox booth for whatever many races those were, 12 to 16 races over the past 19 years. He's been up in the booth. So it's going to be different watching the races next year on Fox and not hearing his voice. Definitely an icon of the sport for well over 4 decades, and the last 2 he spent up in calling these races. And say what you will about how the last few years have gone, his energy will be missed.
Absolutely. I wanted to say a couple of things on Darrell Waltrip because he's someone who I think personally is the epitome of excellence in broadcasting because he brought something to NASCAR broadcasts that I don't really think we'd ever seen, and that was an element of fun. And I think Darrell Waltrip, in general, was one of those guys that you either loved him or you hated him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But I think when he stepped into the broadcast booth, he kind of, at least in like, say, the first 10 or so years, I think he kind of made it a point. He talked and he carried himself in a way that made it very hard to not like him.
Yes, agree. I agree on that for sure.
I think, in general, Darrell, Larry, and Mike all being together up there for Fox made every Fox broadcast enjoyable, worth watching, exciting. I was very pleased when they brought Larry Mack into the booth in pre-race and in post-race, because it's my personal opinion that they never should have put Jeff Gordon up in there, because I felt like that created so much dissonance between him and Darrell.
Well, that's kind of what led to Darrell, in my opinion, it's what led to Darrell's flaws being more pointed out, more so than anything, was Jeff. And I'll disagree with you. I think it was time that you got a driver in there that had raced these cars more recently.
Because Darrell was perfect in 01, because he had just come off the retirement, and he had. But as soon as that COT came out, I really don't think he knew what he was talking about.
Everything that he knew was gone. And you had, when Jeff retires in 15, you bring him in 16. Great move I think it was a great move by Fox. I'm not just saying that because I'm a Jeff Gordon fan. I'm saying that because he was a guy who just stepped out of the car and retiring and has an interest in doing this. But that's what I think led to, hold on, maybe I'm not as good as this what I used to. And that was maybe the fans who realized that before Darrell. And I think he would have liked to make it 20 years there, but unfortunately, he's stepping away now. But you can't take away he's contributed too much to this sport for us to get too mad about it. So shifting now to
no pun intended.
Yeah, to our favorite segment here: upshift, downshift. You like it, you upshift. You don't, you downshift. That's how it works here. So getting right into it, the news broke shortly after we finished recording last week's podcast, that Johnny Sauter was suspended by NASCAR for his actions at Iowa Speedway against Austin Hill while the yellow flag was displayed. He was suspended and sat out for Gateway, but keeps his eligibility for the Gander Outdoors Truck Series playoffs. Rob, do you upshift or do you downshift Johnny's playoff eligibility remaining intact?
I downshift on that because I think that's basically, you gave him a free day. You gave him a get-out-of-jail-free card like that. You gave a guy who really didn't deserve a get-out-of-jail-free card a get-out-of-jail-free card. I don't understand why NASCAR decided, we're going to penalize you, we're going to suspend you, we're not happy with your actions, but you can go ahead and stay in the playoffs. Like, come on! Like, that's not even a penalty. That's just like telling, like, that's just giving them, like, you always know those, okay, you know how, like, when someone gets in trouble, there's a big scandal, and they always get, like, like a police officer does something wrong or something, or like a CEO does something wrong, and they say, oh, well, they're on paid leave. Well, that's just what happened. We just gave Johnny Sauter paid leave. We didn't give him any real justice. We didn't give any real justice to Austin Hill. We just gave Johnny Sauter paid leave. And that's not right. I mean, he should have lost his eligibility, because if you do something like that, because the championship is supposed to be a year-long thing. And if you screw up your championship halfway through, then that you should deal with that. You have to deal with the consequences. The team has to deal with the consequences. You have to learn not to do this. NASCAR has to put their foot down and say, we're not going to do that. Now, all of a sudden, you've opened this can of worms where, if another driver locked into the playoffs comes around and it's like,
or it doesn't have to be locked in.
Right, but it comes around and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to just dump this guy because apparently nothing bad happens to me. Mm-hmm. All I do is get an extra weekend with my family, or get a weekend off, whatever. I can go fishing, or as Johnny Sauter's, in Johnny Sauter's case, he just went racing in a short track, and it's just kind of like that's not how it should be.
Yeah, I downshift it too, and here's the first thing that came to my mind, and whether right or wrong or indifferent, this is what came to my mind. If the NFL suspends a running back for 4 games, you don't say, all right, you averaged 100 yards per carry, we're going to tack on an extra 400 yards to your season total. That's not how it works. Mm-hmm. So you can still be in the running for whatever your, whether that's a career amount of yards ran or whatever. It's an odd comparison. That's the first thing that came to my mind. To me, they sat on the fence on this, and I don't think it was good. We can give a waiver for someone who's sick, injured, and again, I think for those, I think we need to put an asterisk on extent on how many races you miss. But if you're dehydrated like Kyle Larson was, and you have to set out a race, give him a waiver. But here, this was an action taken on track as an experienced driver who knows better, and he went out there and wrecked a guy intentionally under caution. To me, that's a suspension of a race. That's worth that. But your actions on track that got you in trouble, not because you had to sit out because a doctor told you to, but got you in trouble, warrants the eligibility being taken away, and that's how I feel about that. So again, we both downshift on that one. For the past 3 weeks, a driver who crossed the start-finish line first did not win the race. Vettel in Canada, Chastain in Iowa for the Truck Series, and Preece this weekend in Sonoma in the K&N West Series. Are you upshifting or downshifting this trend, and why?
Of course I'm downshifting. This is annoying me. I'm getting tired of this, because, I mean, look at this. Okay, let's see here. Who do we want to win? Who's the fan favorites? Who do people like to win? Well, Vettel's a fan favorite because he's pretty much Hamilton's only competition. Chastain is a fan favorite because, well, he's Ross Chastain. He's Melon Man, Preece is a fan favorite. Well, because he's Ryan Preece. I really never quite understood why he's a fan favorite up until this point, but he is. So, but why? Why are we taking wins away from guys, especially okay, Ross Chastain's situation is a little bit different. He failed post-race tech. Fine. Okay, that's okay. Vettel in Canada, I still think is wrong. I still call it the Montreal Screwjob Part 2. Preece in Sonoma, I'm going to call it the California Screwjob at this point because it was. I mean, that was not... He won that race. Everybody who saw the footage, everybody who was there, even drivers who were in the race, admit that Preece was just better than them and that he should have won the race. And now I'm sure Gregson was happy. He was so happy he threw up again. I'm serious. Yeah. I'm serious. He was
when
so
he
happy
wins, he throws up.
Again.
That's his thing.
We got one guy. I mean, these new drivers are so messy because Ross Chastain comes through one night and he smashes a melon in victory lane, and now Noah Gragson just upchucks in victory lane. I guess that's how it's going to go. But no, I'm gonna downshift because there is just no. There's just nothing we can. Yeah.
I'm going. This is a tough one for me because I say both. I'm going to go neutral. I like that there's storylines and controversy, but let's make sure the controversy is warranted, okay, and make sure the right calls were made. But sometimes I guess that kind of goes against the whole controversy thing. But it's storylines. It's putting racing in some news. I saw NASCAR news and with the Chastain ordeal last week that I didn't think I'd see in places. So yeah. I'm going to go neutral because I don't like the reasons that we have these three. Two are pretty obvious, like downshifts, but one is like, okay, I get it, that's the rule. So I'm gonna go neutral. I gotta stay in neutral on this one. So going to the next one, as we have discussed, the carousel returned this week in Sonoma Raceway for NASCAR. After watching the race, we kind of discussed this a little bit. Final thoughts: upshifting, downshifting the move.
I'm going to have to downshift because I was not a really big fan of it. I think it was cool for IndyCar, but even then I didn't really enjoy it. I've never really liked the carousel as much as everybody else has. I have never really felt like it brought a ton of stuff to Sonoma. I don't know. I'm just going to downshift because I didn't feel like it added anything. I felt like the same race would have happened had we just ran the previous layout. I mean, yeah, it was cool. Yeah, it extended the track. Yeah, it made for a little bit more scenery, but just, I didn't think it was that great.
At the end of the day, I downshift, but at the end of the day, I think the only thing it really added was a pretty cool camping spot.
Absolutely.
It's kind of, unfortunately, be
more
honest.
Camera shots, I guess, being able to see a car come downhill, patrolling a left or a right-handed turn.
It was a good challenge for the drivers, but no one was able to overcome that challenge in a way that made for exciting racing, unfortunately. So I got downshift.
Maybe next year it'll be better.
We'll see. You know what? I'm willing to give it another shot.
I'll give it another shot too.
Yeah. All right. So Lewis Hamilton was told with several laps remaining in Sunday's French Grand Prix that Sebastian Vettel had an opening to pit for tires and for him to go for the fastest lap of the race. Hamilton was told, or later told Motorsport.com, an extra point was available. Naturally, the guys can't know how I feel in the car, but I felt like I had a little bit left in my tires, and there was only one more lap. Hamilton did set the fastest lap as he crossed the finish line and took the checkered flag, but 62 seconds later, Vettel did indeed get the fastest lap and the track record as a result. Do you upshift or downshift Hamilton's decision to forgo the urging of his team not to go for the fastest lap?
Personally, I think his team was right. And I'm going to say why his team was right here real quick, because I think if you're in a situation where you can still lose the champion. I know it sounds crazy to think that Mercedes would lose the championship, but it's not theirs just yet. It's not Lewis's yet. There's still a lot of race to go. And
a good chunk of this season to go.
And a mistake like that, if he felt there was enough left in the tires, but the team didn't think so. If the team was looking at tire wear, if the team was looking at how, the data in front of them and saying, hey, Lewis, don't do it because something bad's going to happen, I think that he should listen to the team in that situation because, sometimes, a lot of the times, the team has better telemetry, the team has more information than the driver ever gets. So sometimes, a lot of the times, when the team knows more, sometimes the driver should heed the team. Now, I understand Lewis's desire to want to compete, want to dominate, want to get everything, and I think if he feels he can go for it, he probably should have gone for it. But I still think listening to the crew, that's the way he should do. He should have listened to the crew, which he did. Even though Vettel got the fastest lap, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because he still won the race. He got his maximum points, and Vettel didn't get maximum points. He got points plus one. I mean, so really, I think he did the right thing because it's going to help him down. You got to be thinking about the championship all the time. You got to be thinking about what's best for the championship. And if the team sits there and thinks, well, if we turn him loose and he goes off track or he runs wide or something happens, it's our fault, or it's his fault, or we could potentially lose the championship on that. And we've seen championships in Formula One come down to Lewis's first championship came down to like
the
little
last
things,
lap.
last lap, things like that. You have to be protective, and I know that maybe one little point there would have helped, but he got maximum. He got the maximum points. He got maximum points for himself, and Vettel did not. So he was able to extend the gap on Vettel anyway. So no, I'm gonna say I'm fine with him. I'm fine with him not doing it.
I'm going to go against the grain. I'm going to go upshift. I'm going to say, he's going to a championship, but the guy's got 5 world championship titles. I think he knows how a car handles and feels. And plus, it's a little bit of, we're talking about it right now. He could have, followed it, and it wouldn't have been a story topic, and Vettel would have got it anyways. But what we were kind of like, and Hamilton's got the fastest lap, but will it hold kind of deal? And we got to wait 62 seconds, but it didn't. I think it was good. It was like, we're talking about it right now, and it was cool. He's not following his team. The team knows now. Hey, okay, now we got to give Lewis an order next time if we want him to do this. So yeah, a little bit of, I don't know if it's controversy, but it's disagreements, and I like that from Formula One, particularly when we had a dull race. So little things like that, I think, improved the weekend. So the next one is Fox's NASCAR coverage of the first half of the Cup and Xfinity seasons have concluded. Obviously, the major change this weekend was Darrell Waltrip's final, but another major change occurred at the beginning of the season when Chris Myers was not at the racetrack at all after the Daytona 500. He was a Daytona 500 host only, and the Hollywood Hotel was retired prior to the season, with all the hosting duties basically going to Shannon Spake in the new Fox NASCAR studios in Charlotte. With a different-looking Fox NASCAR compared to what the two of us grew up on. Are you upshifting or downshifting Fox's 2019 NASCAR campaign and the changes included to the Cup and Xfinity Series?
I'm going to have to, and I've held this kind of opinion since Daytona, and I know it's hard. It's been hard for some people maybe to wrap their head around that, but this is how I feel very strongly. I think the majority of those changes that Fox made really hurt the broadcast production quality, or at least it hurt my opinion of it. I enjoyed the Hollywood Hotel. I always loved Chris Myers. I liked when Jeff Hammond was with him, but I also liked when Michael Waltrip was there. I liked the Hollywood Hotel because I definitely liked the idea of having a studio host at the track. I like the idea of it being kind of a roving, a traveling circus, if you will. I liked that about Speed.
And it could be at times.
They could be at times, too. But I liked that about Speed, how it was a traveling circus. It was traveling every week. You had NASCAR Race Day was there, and now they moved NASCAR Race Day. And granted, they did this a while ago, too, but they've moved this whole NASCAR Race Day to the new studios in Charlotte, and I don't care for the new studios. I don't really care. I want to see the presenters, the hosts, the analysts. I want to see them all at the track. I mean, if I was in that situation, if I was in broadcasting and I had this great job, this great cushy job, and you're telling me I'm not getting media credentials to go here, to go spend time here? The whole reason you get into a line of work like this is so you can go to the events, is so you can experience them, is so you can tell stories, is so that you can, produce the best possible content. And I don't think you can do that at the Charlotte studio. I don't like that. I don't like the idea of, race day changing the way it did. I also have disliked how Fox has just used the Charlotte studio so much that now they're not even sending their truck commentators there. I had a huge issue with this the last couple of weeks where I could notice that their truck commentators were not in Texas and they were not in Gateway. And it was very obvious to do, especially in Gateway, because you did not see a shot of them in the booth. You actually saw a shot of them in the Charlotte studio. And then at Gateway, too, you hear Vince Welch give probably the worst call to the finish of all time that I've ever heard in my life. I don't precisely know how to describe it, so I'm going to actually look it up in my phone so that I can actually take a solid look at this, because I need to remember just how bad it was, because I have it saved somewhere here. But it was bad.
Well, while you do that, I'll do mine, and I can't. Some things on there I can't disagree with, but we gotta remember this is evolving and things change. I kind of upshift. And here's why. I think having a studio opens the door for better doubleheader coverage, particularly if NASCAR were to go a route in the summertime, and have two races in a day at two separate facilities, like with Xfinity and Cup. I think it adds for an easier transition if you're at the same track or you have the same studio doing both races. You think of like NFL. You have the studios of CBS and Fox doing their hosting duties prior to the 1 o'clock game, and in between the 1 and 4 o'clock games, and then after. So I think that's kind of what it opens up the door for. Obviously, Chris Myers, I'm going to admit, after like Atlanta or Las Vegas, I didn't think about Chris until Chicago or until Charlotte. I'm like, I feel guilty that I didn't think about him prior.
I thought about him the whole time. So
and he was such a huge part of that. But I was so involved and sucked into what was going on at the moment and at each race that I feel guilty about that for sure. I do miss a Hollywood Hotel. It was something unique and interesting. Had a really unique name. Fox had a home run with the labeling of that studio. But to me, it was also a little bit different after Jeff Hammond quit coming to the track as he did before. They had an all-star lineup. You had Mike Joy, Darrell Waltrip, Larry Mack, and then you had Chris Myers and Jeff Hammond down in the studio. But to me, overall, it's an upshift. But I share your same concerns. It is year one. And I know you don't really like having Larry Mack and Charlotte not at the track there.
Larry Mack should be at the track. Larry Mack should be one of the analysts and color commentators. I'm okay with him being the rules analyst and all that stuff, but he needs to be at the track. He needs to be there. He needs to be able to have an opportunity to go through the garage and talk to the crew chiefs. He needs to be able to do his job. I'm tired of him because Larry Mack is probably one of the most dedicated people to his job in the entire business. He does more prep work for his job than I think anybody else does, and it is so upsetting to me to see him relegated to this studio in Charlotte. Now, I'm going to actually, and speaking of this, I want to go ahead and read to you what Vince Welch said as Ross Chastain was coming to the line on Friday night at Gateway. And I'm going to read it word for word, quote for quote, and then I'm going to play it back for you so you can hear the actual thing. And I want you to just listen and see if this makes any sense and tell me if you could do a genuine better job. So coming to on the backstretch and going into turn 3, Vince Welch begins racing redemption at his hands. The wheel for Ross Chastain is still and perfect, and he has done it, winning at Gateway. Did that make any sense to you, Josh?
It was a little awkward.
Yeah, it was. It definitely was. Listen.
Racing redemption at his hands. The wheel for Ross Chastain is still and perfect, and he has done it, winning at Gateway.
Nice job.
Yeah, it was unfortunate, and it's been that way for a few years in the Truck Series where the commentators have not been at the track. Particularly in races where the trucks are not at the same place with the Cup, and that is unfortunate.
Yeah, so it was just Fox. You gotta do better, guys. You guys gotta do better. First of all, it can help a lot by making sure Larry Mack travels a lot, and at least putting Chris Myers back in the host position. Because I don't mind Shannon Spake. I think she's great, but Shannon Spake's she's fine to host Race Hub. That's good and fine, but I just feel like the pre-race show needs to be hosted by Chris Myers. I have no problems with Shannon Spake. I've always had a lot of respect for her. I've always liked her. This is not personal. This is nothing. This is purely a taste. I prefer Chris Myers being in that role, and to see him not be in there, it's just kind of frustrating.
All right, well, speaking of Gateway, we're going to speed this up a little bit here. The Gander Outdoors Truck Series. Everyone went into this week obviously talking about Johnny Sauter. We hinted on that. He was suspended. But Ross Chastain, what was it? How would him and Nice Motorsports respond? Well, I think they made their intentions clear. They are here. They are not going to back down. What did I say last week? I said they were going to win again. It might be this week even. And you know what? They went out there and they were top running all race long. His Phil Gold, his crew chief, made the call. No tires, just fuel on the final pit stop. I thought, oh crap, I don't know about this, but I gave him props for going for it. And you had that late race caution where Harrison Burton kind of what he was doing all race long. He was one of the guys making moves and diving in there, and a lot of slide jobs in that race, diving in and sliding up in front of...
It was a very good truck race.
It was a great truck race. And so for him, him and Sheldon Creed got into it a little bit, and he spun, he wrecked, and so the caution comes out. And then we have a restart, and Ross Chastain spun his tires, and everyone is like, oh, crap. Now he's not going to win this race. And he's going to fall back more because he's on older tires. But no, Ross Chastain does what only Ross Chastain can, I think, right now. He's what I tweeted about this, and I think you saw it. I would take 40 Chastains in the trucks in the Cup Series right now if I could, with his passion and the way he drives that car, the wheel man. And he stuck it down there. He did not let anyone get near that truck at the end of the race, and he saw exactly what he wanted to when Todd Gilliland made the move on Christian Eckes to go side by side, going down to turn 1 on the final lap, and you know what? That's all she wrote. Give the win to Chastain at that point.
What the heck was Friesen doing? I mean, I understand why people like Stuart Friesen and stuff. I don't get it. I personally don't get it.
What are we talking about here?
Okay, so you talk about the move Todd Gilliland makes on Christian Eckes. I still think that's a great...
You talking about the last lap?
Last lap, Stuart Friesen just dumps Christian Eckes. I don't know why. I don't know why he did it. I mean, maybe he didn't dump him on purpose. Maybe.
I don't think he dumped him on purpose.
But what the heck's all this about? I mean, you're going for like 4th. You got to dump a guy for like 4th? Come on.
It was third.
Third? It was third. You're right.
Yeah. I don't think he dumped it on purpose. And it's one of those deals. Might have been a misjudgment. But
Eckes was on. I mean, Eckes had run. He was the best KBM car out there.
Oh yeah,
he does not have to finish to show it.
What car was he driving, by the way? The
51, driven by Rudy Fugel, just like you said last week.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It made me very sad, but we want to move on to we'll move down a little bit because you note here, and I noted this too on Friday night, that Harrison Burton and Todd Gilliland are currently not in the truck playoffs.
Yeah, and so they're technically Harrison Burton is still in the playoffs as we speak, but it's kind of a formality. With 5 races left, Chastain is only 38 points out of 20th place. Surely he can get 38 points to get in top 20 in points, which would then move him officially into the playoffs. Well, as they run, if you were to play the hypothetical game, Burton is out and Gilliland is out. So and Sauter's still in there because Sauter fell out of the top 8 in points because he was not racing that Gateway. So, it is very interesting there with those guys. And you got to give props, though, to Burton, though.
I do try to typically give props to Harrison Burton, but I just felt like in that race, Todd Gilliland outperformed him.
I don't think so. I'm going to disagree with you. Burton was ahead of him most of that race, and circumstances helped Gilliland get up to the front. Burton had the best truck when he was up there racing with Eckes.
No, you're right.
And Chastain, because for a number of laps, you could throw a blanket over those three trucks.
I mean, that was just a good race in general, I think you're right. I felt like Gilliland had the better race. I mean, he obviously had the better finish compared to Burton, but I think. But you are right that Burton did lead him a lot of the race.
I don't like to call you out on that, though.
No, I mean, you're fine.
I got to defend Burton, though, because he was making a move that he had made probably half the laps that race going into those corners. And this time, it didn't work. And he was racing a guy who's tough to get by. The next Ryan Newman, I think, Sheldon Creed, because he's not a tough guy. He's not an easy guy to pass at all. So, and that was just a really good racing on their part. And whatever, Gateway provided a good show for the weekend. That leading into the IndyCar race.
Let's move on to IndyCar here.
Gateway was probably the most entertaining race of the weekend because it was the Alexander Rossi Grand Prix at Road America. That's what it was.
I gotta be honest with you. I'm gonna be completely honest with you and our viewers, because and our listeners. So keeping in mind that I probably went at least 48 hours with very little sleep. I started to watch the beginning of the IndyCar race, and I genuinely fell asleep halfway through.
Well, it was easy not to do that, I think, for some people.
I mean, I typically don't do that.
There were two things. There was probably two things you were watching that race. One was how far can Rossi get ahead,
Right.
and where's Scott Dixon? Because Scott Dixon got loose going in and out into turn 5, a hard left-hander, slow left-hander at Road America, and Ryan Hunter Ray got into the back of him. No action was taken by the stewards. The right call on that one, I believe. Do you agree with that? Right call, no call?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because if you're going to say yeah, I might have hit you on that one. Because I'm like, are you serious right now?
No, yeah, no. I typically, I always say let him race whenever possible.
So he gets spun around and falls to 10 seconds behind 22nd. He's last place. And he drives his way up in a caution-free race to finish 5th. Excellent drives by
That's why he's the
Dixon on
Iceman.
that.
That's why he's so good. That's why his driving ability literally terrifies me.
If he wins the championship, he might point at this race and say, that was a critical point.
That was probably his best drive.
I think it was the best race I think I've ever seen him run. And Colton Herta, he's a little fearless. He's pushing hard at points. I think he needs more than he needs to, but he's making things interesting. Had a number of times where we go, check out this move by Colton Herta. And that helps a race like this when Alexander Rossi is acting like, oh, crap, Talladega Nights guy. Just sitting in there drinking his coffee. What is his name? Oh my gosh, I can't remember.
Jean Girard.
Jean Girard, thank you.
You have spilled my macchiato.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. Like Rossi, if he was able to have a canopy or a cockpit over him, that's
how I feel like Lewis Hamilton drives.
Yeah,
I feel genuinely like Lewis Hamilton could be sipping tea the whole time while he's racing.
If you had a more impressive win, Lewis Hamilton might have led all 53 laps at Circuit Paul Ricard, and Alexander Rossi led 54, 55. He won by 28.5 seconds. Might as well call it 30 at that point.
Yeah, I know. Rossi is so good, but I would love just to see what it would be like if Hamilton and Rossi went head.
That would be great. In equally
equal
put them both in Mercedes. That'd be great. Now, here's a question I wanted to ask you. What did you think about the no caution for the concrete debris?
Complete crap.
I mean, here's what I'm thinking to myself. We don't want people to get hurt. It's not in a racing groove, but if you go too wide in there, it's going to get kicked up. And
anytime there's a part of the track comes up,
yeah, you got to throw caution.
You have to.
Now, here's what I'm going to pose this question to you, because I imagine IndyCar had the worry that, wow, if we throw a caution right now, one team is going to really hate us, and the other 22 are going to be 21 at that point are going to be really happy because Marco Andretti had fallen out of the race with issues. What if they had like some sort of virtual safety car? Like, okay, guys, no passing, maintain a certain speed, no gain on margins while we clean up this mess, or at least remove the debris from the racing surface. If we need to fix it, we'll throw a full caution to fix it or red flag, and then we can go back racing. But they should have thrown something to say, look, we're not going to take away his lead. We're also not going to take away anyone else's lead on the other competition. Let's throw a virtual safety car out here, and let's remove the concrete.
I don't know if I wanted to put a virtual safety car, because a virtual safety car is great when the marshals are not on the racing surface. I think when you need to put a marshal on the racing surface to go retrieve a piece of debris, that's when it warrants either a local yellow or a full course caution. Especially a full course caution would be a lot more preferable. And I understand that it's a 4-mile course, too, so you could, throw a local yellow there in that corner, but you'd have to make sure that people could, reduce their speed or were forced to reduce their speed. So maybe a virtual safety car would have worked there, but I really think that a full course yellow would have just been the best route to go. Would have made the race a lot more exciting, probably.
It was a call that, by the rules, what they have now, was the right call. They should not have left the concrete out there the entire race.
No, I don't think so either. But I mean, what are you going to do? I mean,
it's a tough. To me, it was a difficult position for IndyCar, but to me, it was the wrong call was made. Easily, the right call was throwing a caution, getting the debris out there, because if it doesn't hit the driver or the vehicle of the driver who hits the concrete, it's going to hit someone behind them,
right?
And it might get tossed into the racing surface. So, obviously, driver safety is paramount, and I think they missed that. in that particular instance. Glad nothing bad happened. So, moving on.
Yeah, we're finally finished with We're done talking about all the racing. We can actually get into some of the more interesting.
Now we can talk about who do you think we had the best performance, outstanding performance of the weekend. So, for my outstanding performance, it was Matt DiBenedetto. I mean, come on, dude. He got his first top 5 finish at a road course. He was driving Toyota. Might as well have been a Joe Gibbs car, but still, this team has underperformed. I think what some people expected this team to do. I don't think you're going to have another situation where Furniture Row was beating Joe Gibbs. I don't think Joe Gibbs is going to allow that ever again.
Maybe if they get a better driver.
Yeah, we'll see how. Let's give Matt DiBenedetto a whole year here, man.
The man had many years in Joe Gibbs' development equipment and did nothing.
How many races did he run in Joe Gibbs' developmental equipment?
He ran full K&N series. And a couple of nationwide races here and there. And he really didn't.
Well, he got his first top 5. Previous best finish was 6 at Bristol in 2016.
I'm just giving DiBurrito a hard time because Reddit likes to, love him so much. I just give him a hard time, just play devil's advocate.
Well, okay. We'll see what he does. But it was tied Levine family's best career finish of 4th. Michael McDowell in Daytona in July 2017, and Casey Cannon in the same race last year, Daytona in July, both had a 4th. So it was their 3rd career top 5 for Levine family as well. And he was up there the entire day. Once he got to the top 10, he didn't leave. And he passed, what was Jimmy Johnson thinking when he got passed by Matt DiBenedetto? What was Kevin Harvick thinking? What was, who's the other guy he passed? Ryan Newman. And he got around Ryan Newman not so easy. Ryan might have given him a little bit of a nudge there.
Ryan's hard to pass anywhere.
I'm also thinking, and he definitely, I couldn't figure if he was trying to hold back tears or was too tired to cry at the end of that race because a lot of guys were tired.
I'm going to go with it was a combination of both. It was
probably a combination of both. But he was very, it meant a lot to him. Obviously, first top 5 is going to mean something to you. I'm also on the bandwagon that Levine family needs to bring back that paint scheme next week and just run it the rest of the year, the DW throwback. So, Rob, who was your outstanding performer?
Well, my outstanding performance, and I mean, when I saw that you were going to pick Matt DiBenedetto, I mean, he was obviously my first choice, even though I like to give him a hard time.
You stole my first choice last week.
Right, so I guess here's some payback, I guess, on your part. But I'm going to have to give it to Carlos Sainz, and really just McLaren as a whole, because I was so surprised when they qualified 5th and 6th with... That was incredible.
It was McLaren's best race to my recollection.
Absolutely, and it's for a long time. It's been a long time since McLaren has had a performance like this, where they're not just a complete joke.
Yeah, they're
not just a complete backmarker. I mean, both Norris and Sainz had wonderful races. And even though Lando Norris had issues with hydraulics, and I believe it was the steering as well.
Well, it affected the steering.
It affected the power steering.
Yeah. It's why I couldn't use DRS, because I felt like if the DRS opened, it would fail completely.
So, I mean, to not have power steering, or to have a broken power steering.
And not have DRS.
And still hang in there. I mean, come on. I mean, I'm going to give him that. I can't disagree with that. Sainz finished 6th, so he scored points. McLaren, now this is another thing that's crazy, is they're now 4th in the Constructors' Championship, so they're behind Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari.
Yes.
So the top 3 teams in Formula 1 right now...
They're the best of the rest, right?
They are the best of the rest. They are leading Formula 1.5.
Yeah.
They have a comfortable, more or less comfortable, 8-point lead over Renault in 4th in the Constructors. That is huge, considering the fact there was a period of time where McLaren failed to score points entirely.
Yeah.
I mean, did not score points for a long time. Whatever they got going on
there at McLaren is going well, and I think they have 2 good drivers in there. They're going to hopefully stick around there for years to come and build that team back up to where it needs to be, and that's be winning races and competing for race wins.
I absolutely agree with that. And with that being said, now that we've talked about our outstanding performance, we're going to move on to the featured track of the week, and that is going to be pretty much all completely dominated by Josh, because he puts together all this research beforehand. I mean, it makes me feel super lazy. I mean, this guy can find it. I love him. I love that I learn something new every time that I get something here. So, Josh, why don't you tell us about our featured track and go a little bit further in depth on just what it's all about?
Yeah, so this, featured track here, I think we said this in the first one, was, we want to talk about tracks that aren't in existence anymore. And we started with the Indiana State Fairgrounds, which was a track that was soon to be out of existence. We did Nazareth, and we've done Riverside last week. Tracks that people are pretty familiar with, right? Well, this one, have you heard of Memphis-Arkansas Speedway?
I haven't.
Well, now you have. This one is kind of one that's kind of always fascinated me, and I'll tell you why a little at the end here, or part of the reason why. It's located in Lehigh, Arkansas. No, not like Lehigh, like in Pennsylvania. It's L-E capital H-I, Arkansas. It's located approximately 18 miles west of downtown Memphis, or about a 20-minute drive. It was a 1.5-mile high-bank dirt oval in similar shape to Homestead Miami Speedway. And here's the kicker. It was in operation 1954 to July of 1957. Yeah. All right. Crazy. To think that you had a 1.5-mile speedway back then. That was a dirt track, by the way.
I thought, like, Ontario was one of the shorter-lived tracks, like, only going, like, 10 years and having major events there. But what is that? That's 3 years? 4 years? Good Lord.
And NASCAR was the only major series really to visit the track. Buck Baker won the inaugural Mid-South 250, 250-mile race. It was race number 35 of 37 of the 1954 NASCAR Grand National schedule. That's the Cup Series. He won in front of 12,000 spectators. Lee Petty was en route to victory, but broke an axle. What would continue for 11 more laps before finishing third and dropping out 6 laps down.
He finished third 6 laps down?
Yeah, it was nuts. And
I love that old style racing where like one guy wins and the second place is like a lap down.
And fourth place was running, by the way. Buck Baker led the final 17 laps of the 167-lap event. 52 cars were racing that day. So a little bit of comparison, in year 1954, only 2 tracks were longer on the 37-race calendar. Daytona Beach Road Course at 4.1 miles and Linden Airport Course in New Jersey at 2 miles. Both road courses. So it was the longest oval at the time. Obviously, there was Darlington then, but remember, Darlington's only 1.375 miles in length. And of course, there was a few mile dirt tracks, so like fairground tracks, if you will. A couple of those.
But like low bank stuff that might have a cushion, but nothing really
nothing high bank.
You can carry a lot of speed through.
This kind of was super speedway. It was a super speedway in a way. I know it's weird calling it dirt track.
Super speedway dirt track sounds like the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life.
It is pretty neat. Fonnie Flock won the 1955 Mid-South 250 in August. And Speedy Thompson would win the second race. There were 2 races in 1955 at the track. It was 300-mile races, but it had no name. It was just simply a 300-mile race at Memphis-Arkansas Speedway.
Why'd they have no name? Like,
why not
just call it a name?
It was just
call it something.
Race number.
Memphis-Arkansas 300. That's how hard is that?
Not the way they did it back then, I guess. So, in 1956, there would only be 1 race, though, and it moved to June. Ralph Moody won that. It was a 250-mile event. He broke a 16-race winning streak by Carl Kiekhaefer-owned cars. But sadly, the weekend was marred by the deaths of Clint McHugh in qualifying and Cotton Priddy during the race. Marvin Panch would win the final NASCAR Grand National race at Memphis-Arkansas Speedway in July of 1957 after starting 10th in front of an estimated 9,500 spectators. So for comparison's sake, once again, in 1957, there were 53 races on the NASCAR Grand National schedule, 16 more than in 54, and only 4 tracks were longer. Willow Springs Speedway in Lancaster, California at 2.5 miles, Titusville Coca Airport in Florida at 1.6 miles, Daytona Beach Road Course 4.1 miles, and Watkins Glen at 2.3. Again, all were road courses. So it's still the longest track out there. Again, you still have Darlington. There were a few less mile dirt tracks. Again, most of the schedule is dominated by half-mile tracks. There were a few, 0.6, 0.7 mile dirt tracks, but most of them were half-mile and shorter. The NASCAR Convertible Series, a short-lived series, visited there once in 1956, and Curtis Turner was victorious in that race. Now, the track was scheduled to be paved, but the owner could not afford the $100,000 price tag. That's roughly $911,000 today. So the property was sold, and the north ends of the track outside of the turns were turned into catfish ponds. It is the only track in Arkansas ever to host a NASCAR Cup race. Now today, you can clearly see the track from satellite imagery, or the outline of the track, I should say. Simply type in Lehigh, Arkansas. That's L-E-H-I, Arkansas. And it's just due west, just directly south of Interstate 40. So you can see it. Go look it up. You can see where a 1.5 mile track once existed. A 1.5 mile high bank dirt track, no less.
I did that last week when I went to work. I ended up just staring at like what used to be Riverside.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for that, by the way.
No problem. So in today, the information for Memphis-Arkansas Speedway was provided by RacingReference.info. The History of America's Speedways, Past and Present by Alan E. Brown, and NASCAR, The Complete History by Greg Fieldman. The 2016 edition, which, if you're a NASCAR fan, is a must. There are 3 pages worth of information each season since the first NASCAR season back in 1949. So it's really a must-buy. That's where I got a few.
I think I have the 2003 version.
2003 version?
I think, because I know that there's a ton of different versions. There was one I found in 2008, and I know that there's one updated through 2016 at least. There's one that you talked about.
Yeah, the first one I got, I think, went through 2011, but it was real thin. But this one is about 2 inches thick.
Oh yeah, mine the one that went through 2003 was a hardback, and it was very thick.
Yeah.
So
hey, I got a question for you here, man.
Go for it.
What could have been? If Interstate 40 had been built sooner and the crowds would have been able to get there quicker, the track had been paved, what are we looking at here? Does this track survive, do you think, today?
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, because I think one of the main things is when highways are built and people have more access and easier access to things, they're going to make it more of an attempt to go through and see events. I think about all these events that I could go and see right now, that it's easy for me to get to because of a highway. Indianapolis Motor Speedway is right off a highway. I mean, come on. That's great. It's right off 465 in Crawfordsville Road.
Iowa Speedway is right off an interstate.
Iowa Speedway is.
Thankfully, because there's not very good roads in Iowa. I'm sorry, Iowa.
Well, Iowa Speedway is just in the middle of a cornfield.
Well, it's in the middle of a cornfield, but if it wasn't for the interstate, they're in Newton, Iowa.
I didn't know where Newton, Iowa was until Iowa Speedway was built.
That's a good reason not to know where Newton's at. Now, the cool thing about this is that it was a 1.5 mile track. That's the thing that gets me. And we'll talk about it. Later this year, we'll have another big track to talk about. But this one here is a great location. If it survives, I always wonder, it kind of goes back to Riverside. Does Memphis Speedway get built there up north of Memphis? The little short track that we all want to see come back to the NASCAR Truck and Xfinity Series schedule.
Probably not. I think in the same situation that I think a lot of tracks don't get built. I think there's a ton of tracks out there that were built to kind of serve a purpose or serve a market that people felt
underserved.
That were underserved or could do well with the NASCAR race. I think of Chicago.
Yeah.
Chicago Motor Speedway was kind of cool, but once they built Chicagoland, Chicago Motor Speedway became moot because Chicagoland was better racing.
It was also a little bit better area too, and there's
if you look at satellite imagery of Chicago Motor Speedway, you can definitely see that it's literally just in what is essentially an industrial park.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know that there's been tracks built in industrial parks. I think the
Auto Club is a prime example.
Auto Club is one of them. There's a track in the Champ Car used to go to Monterrey, Mexico. There's a track there that is also built on an industrial park.
Fundidora
Park, yeah. So I mean, I wonder about stuff like that too sometimes.
It would have been cool. It would have been interesting to see, how does that track survive, particularly if it gets paved. We see tracks that were once dirt. North Wilkesboro was one of those tracks that did survive a long time after being paved.
I even think it didn't even need to be paved. Why even bother paving it? Because I think a dirt track like that has got to be the coolest. I mean, could you imagine just seeing that today, like the Truck Series or something racing on that?
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
I mean, that would be.
I think it would have been paved eventually because that was a trend to do.
Right, it probably would have been.
And to keep NASCAR, you would have had to pave it, I think, evenally.
Well, right. You could probably race sprint cars on it. I don't think USAC would have. Maybe USAC would have gone there. Maybe I don't know.
I don't know how much more of a half mile makes to those deals, but it definitely would be interesting to see it survive. And if the guy had the money to, if he didn't have the money to pave, have the money to keep it afloat until I-40 arrived. I tried my hardest to figure out and find when I-40 through Arkansas was built, particularly through this area, and I could not find it. All I know is that I-40 is officially recognized as in existence 1957 to present, but that doesn't do it. That could be all the way on the West Coast or the East Coast. So moving on here, there's a great to mention a track that maybe most people don't know about.
Yeah, I learned a lot. I got a great history lesson from that.
There you go. That's what the featured track segment's about. So what's in the windshield? For you IndyCar fans, you got to wait a while. Toronto is the next race, but that doesn't take place until July 14th. So you got to wait a little bit. But Formula One's racing this weekend in Austria at the Red Bull Ring. That's on June 30th.
It's always one of my favorite Formula One Grand Prix because I think that track in general is just beautiful.
Yeah, it's a great looking. It is a very aesthetically pleasing track, unlike Paul Ricard.
Yeah, no, for real. I mean, and notice how it has plenty of runoff area without having a bunch of issues.
It's crazy. It also would this Paul Ricard look half better if they just painted it all green.
Yeah, there was a Reddit post I saw about Paul Ricard where someone actually replaced, like, they photoshopped in like gravel and like paved over runoff areas without paint or anything, and grass, and it looks so much better.
Well, and they said the different paints had slowed the cars down.
They do,
and I'm like,
the different
paints.
paints.
You could do that with the green too. And if you wanted to keep that style, you could do it with.
Well,
green.
You know why they paved over Paul Ricard, right? It's because for a while there, it was actually it didn't host any major races. It was actually a giant glorified test track. They called it the Paul Ricard High Tech Test Track. And when they did that, teams that were testing there didn't want their cars, if they had a problem or something, they didn't want to wreck cars. So what they did was they paved all over it, and they put that paint there that slowed the cars down. And that prevented cars from being torn up if they had a tire go down or if the driver missed a braking point or something like that. That just prevented, and the car wasn't beached. They didn't have to get a crane out there and go get it out. They could just like push it right out. And that was the main reason for that. But I think now that it's no longer a test track, I think they should probably add some grass. AstroTurf would be great.
So if you're a stock car fan, back to what's in the windshield. Instead of looking back in the rear, we were looking at the rear windshield there for a second.
Always check your mirrors.
Always check your mirrors. It is good. It's sometimes good to look back. But if you're a stock car fan and you're in the Chicago area and within a few hours drive, you have the potential to go to 4 races. ARCA's racing on June 27th for the Bounty 150. The Trucks on June 28th for the Camping World 225. The Xfinity Series, June 29th for the Camping World 300. First race for the NBC. So we'll see Rick Allen, Steve Letarte, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Jeff Burton knock off the rust a little bit for June 30th. Slide Job, Camping World 400, at Chicagoland Motor Speedway in Gillette, Illinois.
I still think that NBC's coverage should start with Daytona.
It would be nice.
But I guess NASCAR likes it this way. I think, and I also do firmly believe.
Depends on the calendar. It depends on how the dates fall.
Chicagoland should always be after Daytona. Chicago should always be after Daytona.
Would you rather start Kentucky?
No. I'd rather Kentucky be after Chicago.
Well, I agree. I'd rather Kentucky be dropped off the schedule. Oops, did I let that slip out?
I would prefer Kentucky to have not repaved.
Yeah, that's true. So, but anyways, what are you thinking this weekend? Obviously, I think, like we've said a few weeks, we've got it right. Mercedes has won in Formula One.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if. Well, but Austria is a bit of a it's a bit of a crapshoot usually. Last year, it was a bit different.
We've said that about a couple of races this year.
That's true. But I do firmly think that we have a situation here. We might see. I think Vettel might actually do it. I'm going to talk really quietly because I don't want anyone to hear it, because I don't want to accidentally ruin his chances, but I think Vettel's got a
We're not editing this out
chance.
Either.
No. As for NASCAR, again, I'd have to take a look at the entry lists. It's pretty tough to really take a guess on who might win that, but I think anything can happen, and it'll be
I think we've seen
good
anything
races.
Can happen. I think we've seen that.
Well, I don't know about the Cup race. Cup race might be good because it's a mile and a half, and typically the package works for mile and a half.
We'll see how it works with it being so hot. It's going to be, well, we don't know if it's going to be hot. It's a few days out now. Indiana this year, I've learned, don't trust meteorologists. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it was supposed to rain like all day the last couple of days, and it never rained at all.
It sprinkled a little bit. It's rained at night, where we've all been able to get our yard work done. I haven't done any yard work. Sorry, Mom and Dad. But my dad and I were able to get some barn stuff ready for some concrete guys, but it was supposed to be raining during that time too. So I don't know. It's it's going to be interesting to see. We'll have to wait till the day before. It's easier to predict, particularly the weather this year. But I would not be surprised if we see Bell, Custer, or Reddick go into victory lane in the Truck Series. I'm not going to count Ross Chastain out. He won. It's an under the lights race for Chicago in the Truck Series. He won under the lights in Kansas earlier this year.
Watch Johnny Sauter come back in.
Oh yeah, Johnny Sauter would be. Is he in redemption category?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I just think he's probably wanting to win.
Is he going to be like Will Power and win and go the double middle finger up to the control tower?
Will Power never did that when he won.
He never did it when he won, but I'm just saying. Well, that will be what Johnny Sauter does.
I don't think he's gonna. I think
crazy?
He's just gonna. Because the comments he made to the media about Austin Hill basically shows me that he has no remorse for it, which means he's moved on from it.
Hey, you know what? I'd rather see it moved on Johnny Sauter than something lagging behind. So that's true. That's good. I don't know. Well, the Cup Series, it's like,
well, the Cup Series is probably going to be won by a Gibbs car that's not Eric Jones. Probably not Eric Jones. I mean, Denny Hamlin might win it, I guess, maybe.
Hamlin's third on that list.
But yeah, he's definitely not the favorite. I don't know. We'd have to check out some of the odds.
You know what? I'll go on a limb. Chevy have been on a nice little roll, and then they showed up and only put one car in the top 10 at Sonoma. I think Chase Elliott would have been higher if he doesn't have an engine dropout. But Kyle Larson might be the one guy you might go out on a limb here because just with his package. And him maybe.
I think the race being as good as it was last year kind of opens up that. I think it opens up that possibility. For me personally, though, I mean, it's going to come down to whether or not the package is raceable.
Yeah.
I think, if you're able to pass, we'll see. But who knows? Anyway, so that being said, I don't want to end on a negative note. NASCAR race will still probably be good. Don't worry about it. Watch it anyway. At least. But anyway, so that will do it for this week. Join us next week as we recap and discuss racing and the new surrounding weekends in Austria, Chicago, and more. Be sure to follow us again on Twitter. Josh is at roller_01, ROLLER_0 and 1. And I am at RPEETERS33, Rob Peters, RPeters33. Thank you all for your support, and we hope that you join us next week. For Josh Roller, I'm Rob Peters. Thank you for listening, and this was the Racing with Rob and Roller podcast. Have a great week, everyone.
Have a good one.